CEO and co-founder of SweepSouth, as they make their way to the stage. Level 3 applause, please.
Dr. Naledi Pandor is South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation. Prior to this, she held the positions of Minister of Higher Education and Training, Minister of Science and Technology, and Minister of Home Affairs. Dr. Aisha Pandor is the co-founder and CEO of SweepSouth, Africa's first online platform for booking, managing, and paying for home cleaning. SweepSouth has connected over 15,000 previously unemployed and underemployed domestic workers to work opportunities.
Well, thank you very much to both Dr. Pandor and Dr. Pandor for joining us here today, making it very clear that both women have PhDs in their own respective fields, education, and I also understand within the sciences background, if I'm not mistaken. I think as a disclaimer, Minister, we need to be clear that you do have 4 children in total. Aisha's not your favorite, right?
You don't have to say anything. It's fine.
They're all my favorites.
They are all your favorites,
Yes.
spoken as a true parent who, of course, shares equal love for all her children. I'd like us to actually start off with engaging you in terms of the raising of your children and, of course, understanding that you share your insights with them, share your experiences with them. But as we heard in the previous video from May Musk, who was engaging with Moira Forbes, that when you actually hear the ideas that your children have, you tend to brush them off and think, that's a bit outlandish, that's a bit ambitious. Where did you get this kind of thinking from? But what's your experience been with raising Aisha and actually realizing that there's a sense of leadership and economic capability within her?
Well, thank you very much to Forbes Women Africa for the opportunity to be here with Aisha. I don't often get a chance to see her, so it's lovely to see you, Aisha. I'd like to begin by saying I'm not 73. I'm well below that age, and I think it's EFF or something who started that rumor.
Wrong stats on the internet.
It's not right. But let me say that one of the lessons I've learned is that you have to let children be who they wish to be. Aisha is a very strong-willed person who has her own ideas about what she wants to do. And I think as a mother, what we tried to do was nurture, where she wished to grow, but also encourage her to have as much experience in a range of areas as is possible. So we would encourage academic work. We also encourage sport, creativity. All my kids had to do speech and drama at school. So it's very clear. So, just nurture an interest in a wide range of things. I think that's really important. But she's also a person with her own mind. I thought, I'd mapped out her career track because she was very good in science. I love science, but I'm bad at it. So I thought, God gave me Aisha. She's going to achieve, because she was good in maths and science from small. And so, she did very well at school, matric, and then went into a science faculty, did very, very well at undergraduate level, was invited to carry on with an honors degree, and did very well in the honors year, and was in fact asked to proceed to masters prior to finishing the honors, because she was, so I was like, over the moon.
Yes, living out your
my dream, right?
Yes.
So anyway, she continues from masters, she's into the PhD track, and completes her PhD with much fanfare and celebration on our part, because I'm now thinking, here's our senior researcher. All these things I've been talking about of science and technology, my child is going to live the example I'm encouraging all South African children to follow, because this was what I was constantly communicating. Well, lo and behold, one day Aisha comes along with her husband, who happens to be a software engineer, and they tell us about this plan that they've already cooked up. And it's more or less complete, we're getting to know at the end point that they're going to start this tech startup. And so I said to her, what about your research career?
Yes.
And she goes, no, this is what I want to do. I said, what? But you've got a PhD. You could be a professor at the University of Cape Town. What are you talking about, you know? Or Fort Hare, where our grandparents went to school. And she says, no, Mum, we've designed this program, we've started our company, this is what we want to do. And they began to tell me all about it, and her father. Both of us were livid, I must tell you. We thought, these kids, they're going to be a problem for us. You know, they'll be coming to beg for money and everything.
And I understand that was the case for a few months within growing the company.
Exactly, yes. But anyway, a few years down the line, here we are. I'm very proud of her. I've learned my lesson. Let your children go where they wish to go.
I certainly think that's a remarkable story that you've shared in terms of allowing them access and, of course, not necessarily restricting them to the particular views you have. And today, Aisha, you stand as an award-winning entrepreneur, having won rounds and rounds of additional funding, even as far ashore as Silicon Valley in terms of recognition for your company. And I guess the story that Minister Pandor has really relates to the intergenerational conversations that we have to take place within us as children and parents, and at times reaching elements of conflict, frustration, and even if you managed to get your way, at some point you had to go back in a very humble manner to say, I might have messed up, I need some assistance just in order to keep me going. What was your experience in that regard?
I mean, it was tough. It was tough, and in fact, it wasn't a few months. I lived with my parents for probably 4 years.
Wow.
After starting our business. We eventually ended up selling everything that we had to fund the business. I think we moved out a year ago, maybe.
A year ago.
I was pregnant with my third child, and I said, now I've probably got to find my own house. Wow. So there were huge sacrifices. And although my parents did have reservations, they supported us, and I think that's also been a feature of my childhood, not just with myself, but with my 3 siblings as well, is that what my parents have focused on, and my mom speaks about our upbringing, is bringing us up to have the right moral compass, so to make good moral decisions and ethical decisions, to be well educated. So I knew while I was doing my PhD, kind of towards the end of my writing up my thesis, I knew that this didn't feel like what I wanted to spend my life doing. But there was absolutely no way I was not going to finish that PhD. Like, then I would have been in big trouble. So education has always been, and the choice of what we choose to study, my parents have left that up to us. But the idea of learning and knowledge has been very important. So I think what my parents have tried to do is instill the right sort of kind of baseline and the grounding, and then have allowed us to make decisions and given us some freedom in the decisions we make based off of the fact that they knew that they'd given us that grounding.
And that says a lot in terms of the thinking that your parents have, and if I can direct this back to you, Minister, and even if you share some insight, Aisha, on how both your parents have gone beyond just putting you in a box, and of course sharing some of this EQ elements in terms of be independent, take bold and brave decisions, just as long as they work in your favor. That is a lesson that a lot of us need to learn within the room, because so often as a parent and family member, even as community members, we measure our success and the success of our families in the form of how our children progress going forward. And given the economic climate that we come from, a lot of it is based on financial success. How do you strike a balance between encouraging, motivating, but also ensuring that we're not focused on things that are menial and will disintegrate ultimately at the end of life?
I think, it's very important that we talk a lot within families. I was very lucky that my parents talked to us all the time, to the point where it actually was rather too much, we felt. But those conversations are in my head. I haven't forgotten them. Rely on yourself. Be educated. Whether girl or boy, you must have schooling. be free, be independent, and education is your independence. Take good care of yourself. Respect others. Be humble. Those lessons stay, and then family is everything. These were lessons we were taught by our parents, and we tried to communicate them to our children. We also, because we grew up in sometimes difficult circumstances, you know, South Africans, they think people who are in exile had it really easy. I lived in many different countries, and everywhere we moved, I had to go back a school year.
Sure.
So life was tough. And, you know, anyway, let me not go there. But the key point is, be very wary of material things governing your life. Young people today in South Africa are successful, many, in a way that we never imagined. And I think the trappings of success can be a danger. You know I sound really boring now, but you have to have a measured life. You know, Aisha and them were not easy. You know, now she's done very well. They went to parties, but I made sure I was the one picking them up. So it meant I didn't sleep. I went to school. I was very busy. I've always worked as an adult, but I and my husband, we took them to school.
Yes.
And those conversations in the car are the most important with your children on that drive to school. Don't be quiet in the car. Find out more, because you get insights about the friends, about the next outing, about the teacher, etc.
Yeah.
Talk in that car. That's where that relationship is honed and built.
And the trust is also built a lot further there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so my parents, I remember as a child, especially in high school, you know, you're driving to school and then you're listening to the radio and the radio gets turned down and you're like, oh, okay.
The dreaded question,
yeah,
how was your day?
Now we have to talk, yeah. But I think absolutely, like having conversations, speaking. When Leila was speaking, she talked about culturally children being taught that politics is for adults and not for children. And my upbringing was almost the opposite, where you were engaged in these conversations around adult things, but those conversations gave you the confidence to think about, you know, the world more broadly and think about leadership and think about what are examples of good leadership or bad leadership. So very, very useful. And I think, you know, I think about those kind of guiding points today when I'm leading my own company. And then I think the other thing is also a life of service, which has been, and not something necessarily that my parents explicitly talk about a lot, but something that by example they've shown us.
Yeah.
So, you know, I remember my mom is a very, very conservative person with money. Sometimes, you know, I remember when I was young and she'd send us out to get groceries. And I'd be like, Mom, this amount you've given me, like you're not factoring 5 years of inflation into this amount.
Wow.
Like this is not going to buy us, you know, so very conservative. And when I'd say, you know, spoil yourself a little bit, she'd say, you know, I've been given so that I can give to other people as well. Like I have enough, now that I have enough, I want to, it's to give. And so the idea of a life of service is also what prevents you from, you know, wanting to kind of extract and exploit wealth, this idea of, you know, I want to run a business so I can be as rich as possible. I want to run a business so that I can help people and so that my life has impact and meaning. And that's come out of the good example of both my parents, not just my mom, but my father as well, who is a huge feminist.
How much of a role has that played in your life?
It's an incredibly big role. So I have an older brother who's 2 years older than me, and then a sister who's 3 years younger, and then a younger brother who's, I think, seven years younger than me. And it was my father who, and a feminist is, you know, it's not a scary, big, you know, some guys get scared when you call them a feminist. A feminist is someone who believes in the social, the economic, the political, and the educational equality of women. That's all. And so my father's a feminist, and he would say to us when we were young, and he'd say to me, he'd give, my brother got his first computer, and he'd say, your brother asked for this computer, but you need to know how to use it. If it breaks, you need to know how to fix it. And he'd say to me often, your boys are not better than you. Your brother's not better than you. You're the same. You can do everything that your brother can do. And that message was drummed into us over and over again.
Yeah.
But I think importantly for me, not just by my mom, but by my father as well.
Yeah. Very briefly, as we do close up, because I do think you've clarified the type of thinking that one needs to have as a parent, the kind of intergenerational conversations you need to engage in building up the trust, that success is not always what it looks like from the outside. It's taken a lot of sacrifice and maybe even loans that you owe to your family members and parents. But you have 3 children, as you've mentioned. What kind of conversations, bearing in mind we're living in a tech age, 4 IR, again, elements that your mother in her role as a minister is also quite passionate about. What conversations are you having now with your children to ensure that they're empowered even further than what you were?
Well, let me tell you, one day, Aisha's daughter, 5 years old, and I said to her, talk to me, Granny's visiting, talk to Granny.
Yes.
And she says, I'm busy. And I said, what are you doing? 5 years old. She says, I'm coding.
Wow.
I wanted to run. I mean, really.
At least she's meeting some of the policies that you've had in your previous capacity, right? The objectives there.
So I think the biggest thing is leading by example. There's a lot of guilt, and I feel this a lot as a mother. There's a lot of guilt that comes with being very busy and having a family and having children. But I look at my upbringing as an example of how you can balance the two. So, yes, my mom was incredibly busy when we were growing up, but she would always, I played music, I played the recorder, and I feel sorry for my parents for, going through 10 years or whatever of me learning the recorder and then the clarinet and whatever, but they would always, always come to my concerts. No matter where they were at the time, they'd always make an effort to make sure that they were there. So this idea of your mother being able to have a career and a life outside of being a mother, but also being there for you when you need her. And even now, I don't think I've ever tried to get hold of my mom and not been able to, regardless of what country she's in or what meeting she's in or whatever. And I'm not able to do that for my kids. I'm not as good at doing that as my mom is. So I think that's really important, is to be that example, but to also be there for your children. I think, so the idea of technology and young girls being involved in technology, I think is also really important. And I think one of the earliest speakers spoke about it, is you need to be, your eyes to be open about what the world looks like today and what the world is going to look like tomorrow. And you need to gear yourself for the right skills to be able to be a leader and to be in a good position when that happens. And so my 2 oldest children are girls, and I've tried to encourage them to look at what you want to do. Technology is obviously going to be a big feature in the world of not just today but tomorrow. Learn coding. We're busy trying to set up an online shop. She wants to sell kind of things around the room and fashion and stuff for teenagers, because she says it's difficult for her to find clothes that are cool in South Africa. So so we're trying to encourage our kids to be entrepreneurial, to take advantage of technology. And then I think that the last thing is probably, again, just leading with the right sort of like softer skills. So ethics, morals, having a good moral compass. I think culture in family is a big thing that people don't talk about. We talk about culture in organizations.
Yes.
But my parents always would say to us, we don't do things that way. We're not like that. And I hated it when I was young because I wanted to be like my friends. But having a family culture, because when your children are older and you're not there to tell them how to make every decision, that culture should be so deeply embedded in them that they're able to do the right things.
I think some phenomenal points that you've shared with us today. You might be the envy of many who might want you to adopt them later this afternoon into your family unit. But we appreciate the feedback that you've provided us with. And of course, I guess the biggest encouragement is allow your children and your parents to live their full lives as their authentic selves, whatever that is, and being able to support them within those initiatives. To Dr. Pandor and Minister Pandor, thank you so much for your time today and joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, I think a round of applause, level 3, for my panelists today as they make their way off stage. Thank you so much. so much. Thank you so much, Minister. Likewise. Much appreciated as they make their way off stage. And I think quite a beautiful picture that we see there of, again, a relationship where both individuals are proud of each other, regardless of the intergenerational challenges that we might experience with our parents, and of course, opportunities that also exist. We continue with further conversations and discussions that will take place, and this time in the form of a panel discussion, ladies and gentlemen.